Sarah Parker, a 32-year-old marketing executive from Chicago, was on her way to her family's cabin in the remote woods of northern Wisconsin. She had spent the last few days dealing with a particularly stressful project at work and needed a break. The cabin, a relic from her childhood, was the perfect escape, a place where she could unwind and disconnect from the chaos of her urban life. It was supposed to be a quick drive, just a detour off the main highway to avoid a traffic jam. She had taken this route before, but never this late, never alone in the dead of night. The night sky was an inky black, stretching endlessly above her. Her car's headlights cut through the thick darkness, illuminating only a narrow strip of the asphalt road and the occasional skeletal trees looming on either side. The rest was swallowed by shadows, an oppressive void that seemed to close in around her. Her GPS flickered and stuttered, the screen momentarily going dark before coming back to life with a soft ping. Recalculating route, it announced, its robotic voice sounding strangely human in the empty night. Sarah glanced at the device, frowning. The map was a tangle of lines and loops, each one leading her deeper into the unfamiliar terrain. She hadn't realized how far she had deviated from her original path. As she drove on, a sense of unease began to creep over her. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, the same barren trees passing by like an unending procession of silent sentinels. There were no other cars, no signs of life, just the relentless hum of her engine and the rhythmic thud of her tires against the cracked asphalt. A shape emerged from the darkness ahead, standing by the roadside. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It was a man, tall and thin, his face obscured by the shadows. He raised a hand, a hitchhiker's signal. She hesitated. Picking up strangers was something she had always avoided, but something about the man's stillness, the way he stood there as if waiting for her specifically, made her shiver. As she slowed down, the hitchhiker stepped closer, his features coming into the dim light. He had a gaunt face, eyes sunken and hollow, a thin smile playing on his lips. His clothes were old-fashioned, almost like something out of another era. "Need a ride?" Sarah called out, her voice sounding small and uncertain. The man nodded, his smile widening. He opened the passenger door and slid in, the leather seat creaking under his weight. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "I was starting to think no one would come." As they drove on, Sarah tried to make conversation, but the man's answers were vague, almost evasive. He spoke of the road, how it was ancient, how it had seen countless travelers over the centuries. "It's a place of memories," he said, his eyes staring into the distance. "People often forget what they leave behind on this road." Sarah's skin prickled with unease. She glanced at the man, his face partially hidden in the shadows. There was something unsettlingly familiar about him, as if she had seen him before, but she couldn't quite place where or when. "Do you travel this road often?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man turned to her, his hollow eyes meeting hers. "I've been here for a long time," he replied. "Longer than you can imagine." A chill ran down her spine. She focused on the road ahead, her mind racing. The air inside the car seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. The road stretched on, winding and turning in ways that felt unnatural, almost labyrinthine. As they rounded a particularly sharp bend, the man suddenly reached out and gripped Sarah's arm, his fingers icy cold. She gasped, jerking the wheel, causing the car to swerve. "Stop," he commanded, his voice now filled with urgency. "There's something you need to see." Sarah pulled over, her heart pounding in her chest. The hitchhiker released her arm and opened the door, stepping out into the darkness. He gestured for her to follow. Against her better judgment, Sarah got out of the car, the cold night air biting into her skin. The hitchhiker led her a few steps away from the road, to a clearing surrounded by towering trees. In the center of the clearing was an old, dilapidated house, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. The sight of it filled her with a sense of dread. "This house," the hitchhiker said, his voice almost reverent. "It holds the past." Before she could respond, he walked towards the house, disappearing into the shadows. Sarah stood there, torn between the urge to flee and the strange compulsion to follow him. Taking a deep breath, Sarah followed the hitchhiker into the house. The air inside was thick with dust and decay, the wooden floorboards creaking under her feet. The house felt frozen in time, a place abandoned and forgotten. The hitchhiker was standing in the middle of the living room, staring at a portrait hanging on the wall. It was a family picture, faded and yellowed with age. Sarah stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. Her blood ran cold. The family in the portrait looked eerily familiar. The father, mother, and 2 children, one of them was her. She recognized her younger self, standing there, smiling. "This can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've never been here before." The hitchhiker turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Memories are strange things," he said softly. "Sometimes we bury them so deep, we forget they ever existed." Sarah backed away, her mind reeling. She stumbled out of the house, desperate to escape the oppressive sense of unease. The hitchhiker followed her, his presence a silent specter. Back in the car, Sarah fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking. She started the engine, the headlights cutting through the darkness once more. The hitchhiker sat silently beside her, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. As they drove, the landscape seemed to shift and change, the road becoming narrower and more treacherous. The trees loomed closer, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. "Where are we?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her chest. The hitchhiker's smile returned, but it was no longer comforting. "We're almost there," he said cryptically. "The road knows where it's taking us." The car suddenly jolted, as if hitting something. Sarah slammed on the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a halt. She looked around frantically, but there was nothing, just the endless, empty road. The hitchhiker turned to her, his eyes now filled with a strange light. "Do you remember now?" he asked. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand," she cried. "What is this place?" "This is where it happened," the hitchhiker said softly. "Where you lost them." Images flooded her mind, flashes of a terrible accident, a car veering off the road, screams filling the air. She remembered now, the night she had tried so hard to forget. The night she lost her family. "This road," the hitchhiker continued, "it's a place of penance. A place where those who cannot let go come to remember." Sarah's heart ached with the weight of the memories. She had buried the pain so deep, tried to move on, but the road had found her, brought her back to face the truth. The hitchhiker reached out, his touch gentle this time. "It's time to let go," he whispered. Sarah nodded, tears blurring her vision. She closed her eyes, the sounds of the night fading away, replaced by the echoes of the past. When she opened her eyes again, the hitchhiker was gone. The road was empty, the night silent. She sat there for a moment, the weight of the memories lifting, leaving her feeling lighter, freer. Taking a deep breath, she started the car and drove on, the darkness slowly giving way to the first light of dawn. The road behind her was a fading memory, but the road ahead was hers to discover anew. And as the sun rose, Sarah felt a sense of peace, knowing that some roads, no matter how dark, eventually lead to the light.
Cling tightly to the last vestiges of courage as we bid farewell from the eerie realm of Midnight Whispers Network. Remember, the darkness may fade for now, but its whispers linger on, waiting to be heard once more. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the terrors that lurk in the night. Farewell, brave souls, until we meet again in the shadows.